DFS Gen Nation, what is up? What is happening? We are back again with another week. We are on to week 4. This week, I think, is going to be a little bit of an interesting one. I think this slate, has the obvious chalk game that's going to be the Buffalo-Baltimore game. Everybody's going to want to play that, getting Lamar Jackson against Josh Allen. But I think there's some other spots we can pivot to find some pretty good value this week. So that being said, let's just jump right into it. Waste no time. We start at the quarterback position like always. Up top, the 6K and above quarterbacks this week are Josh Allen, 8,400. Lamar Jackson at 8,300. Jalen Hurts at 8,200. Kyler Murray at 7,600. Justin Herbert, who got in a full practice today. Good to see that. At 7,100. Russell Wilson at 6,700. Then you have Aaron Rodgers, 6,300. Carson Wentz at 6K. And that rounds out the group. So, Maddie, what are we doing at quarterback this week?
Yeah, I mean, obviously you can play one of the three guys up top, Josh Allen, Lamar, and Jalen Hurts. I mean, there haven't really been anybody hotter than those three guys to start the year. They're all just producing massive fantasy games on a weekly basis. And, they're all in, Buffalo is dealing with injuries on their defense. Baltimore's got injuries in their secondary, and Baltimore keeps playing in these shootouts. Jacksonville and Philly is got a higher total this week. They're around like 47. So, and Jacksonville's offense has been pretty good this year too. So they should, despite Philly having a good defense, Jacksonville should be able to score a little bit of points. And it seems like, Jalen Hurts goes out and absolutely smashes in the first half, and then they back off him a little bit because they get a big lead. They crush Minnesota, crush Detroit. So any of those three guys are in play up top. It's just kind of, I think ownership's going to end up being spread out a little bit. Maybe goes to Lamar more than the other two, just because of how good Lamar has been. But really can't fault you for wanting to play any of those guys. But I'm probably going to end up, I'm still playing around with builds, but I'm probably going to end up with some of these guys below the 6K range. And I know you stopped at 6K, but I don't really have any interest in anybody else that's above 6K. I'm curious if you do, but my interest is peaked with guys like $5,900 Jared Goff. If Amon-Ra plays, we've already pretty much gotten wind that DeAndre Swift is going to be out till the bye week. I don't know that it's been anything official on that, but it seems to be, what their goal is with him. So, if he's out, then they're not just going to give Jamal Williams 30 carries. So, I think they could lean on Goff a little bit more, but I don't like Goff if Amon-Ra sits, because then that's a big hit to that pass catching core. But if Amon-Ra plays and Swift is out, that's a really big boost to Goff, against a really bad Seattle defense at home. So I really like Jared Goff this week if all of that falls into play for him. I think Matt Ryan is also interesting at 5,600. They're facing Tennessee, and Tennessee is just pretty much the worst defense in the NFL right now, both on the ground and through the air. You can pretty much attack them any way you want. So I've also toyed around with playing Matt Ryan, Jonathan Taylor, and Michael Pittman in the same build and just getting all the Colts points. Because I don't see a way, the Colts don't score, 25 plus points here against the god-awful Tennessee defense. So they're very interesting. And then some no-name guys we probably won't mention, but other than this week, because this week is a weird week. I think Mariota is interesting at home against Cleveland. We've seen Cleveland give up big games, including to Joe Flacco. Joe Flacco threw all over them for 300 plus yards and a couple TDs. And then also, Geno Smith is interesting on the road in a dome in Detroit. I think, Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf should be able to make some big plays. And Geno Smith is, he had 17 DK points in week 1 and 23 last week. He threw the ball 44 times last week in what was a shootout with Atlanta. So I really think you could end up seeing a Seattle-Detroit game that shakes up like the 23-27 Atlanta-Seattle score from last week. So there's some cheaper guys that are in play here, but it's all going to come down to, what those guys allow you to do with the rest of your positions compared to, having to pay up at quarterback and playing cheap position guys. But there's definitely some cheap guys to like this week.
What are your thoughts on Russell Wilson at 6,700
I'm
against?
not playing him.
Is it because of how poor they play?
They look so bad. Now, granted, I do still have interest in either Judy or Sutton, and the reason the thing with Russ is if you take him back to his Seattle days when he had DK and Lockett, he always, it seemed to be each game he supported one of the two, but never both for a tournament winning score. So until that changes in Denver, and until pass volume goes up to where that can change, I think it's just going to be a matchup based game plan on a week to week basis. And some weeks it's going to be Sutton, some weeks it's going to be Judy. And I mean, they're both cheap enough that if Russ has a really good game, he's going to take one of those guys with him because they are the offense. Them and Javonte Williams essentially in the pass game, as he's not really targeting tight ends. And they don't really have any other receivers like KJ Hamler. He's out there just running sprints, not getting any targets. So, yeah, I don't have interest in playing Russell Wilson, but I will play or have interest in playing one of Judy or Sutton. Is how I'm going to approach the Broncos.
I actually really like Russell Wilson this week. I think this is a good spot for him to really bounce back. We know that this offense is better than what we've seen. I think it probably takes some time for them to kind of really gel and get everything in line here. Now, I mean, a couple of the week one game, Monday Night Football on the road, Seattle is not a great environment. And then last week playing San Francisco, which is a top 5 defense in the league, also isn't a great, obviously. Now you have the Houston game that was sandwiched in there, and yes, they did not look very good in that game either. But I think eventually this team is going to explode, and this feels like one of those spots where it can happen. They're going to come with no ownership whatsoever, and I think it's a pretty easy stack. And I do agree, if you're going to stack them up, I don't want to stack them up. I don't want to stack both Judy and Courtland Sutton. I want to pick one, much like you brought up. But I do think this is a good spot in a matchup, inside a dome. It's not in Denver, and so in Las Vegas. And I think both these teams. I think this could be a game that really turns out into a pretty big shootout. And so I like Russell Wilson at 6,700. That is a very fair price for him. And so if you want to get a little bit different, I like going to Russ, in this matchup against against the Raiders, who it's a Titans offense that looked terrible. This Raiders team is reeling right now. Their defense is terrible. They're 23rd in pass DVOA on the season. And so I think, if you want to bet on Russ to bounce back at really low ownership, I think this would be a good spot to do so. I really would love to play Aaron Rodgers against the Patriots because I think the Patriots defense is trash. I just don't think they're very good. But without Brian or without probably Mac Jones in this game, I just don't know if they're really going to have to do a whole lot. It could be one of those really efficient games where Aaron Rodgers comes out and throws 2 or 3 touchdowns, but I don't think the yardage is going to be there.
Just like the Bears game.
Yes, very much similar to that kind of path, and so that is what worries me with that game because I would love to play $6,300 Aaron Rodgers at home, but I just can't do it in this matchup against the Patriots because I just don't think Brian Hoyer and this terrible Patriots offense is going to be able to really get anything going here. So, but I will say down low, I think Daniel Jones is kind of interesting, especially because we're seeing him, really. I mean, we saw him last week. He's had 6, 10, and 9 carries in his first 3 games of the year. He is running the ball quite a bit, 9 for 79. The only problem is with him right now is who do you pair him with? Sterling Shepard's out for the year with an ACL. Kadarius Toney and Wan'Dale Robinson, neither one of them have practiced yet this week. I would love to, if they can get some of these guys back. I think Daniel Jones at 5,400 against the Chicago defense that just isn't good at all, and so I think that he could be an interesting play, mainly because of his rushing upside that he possesses. Had almost 80 yards rushing last week against the Cowboys. But it is kind of thin because I just don't know who those other options are going to, who the passing options are going to be. Kenny Galladay's just terrible. I don't think I really don't know if he's ever actually been good. I think Matt Stafford made him look a lot better than what he ever was because he has just looked completely lost his entire time with the Giants. So I think if you wanted to get a little bit different, I think Daniel Jones could be a spot you could go to. But Up top, I guess to try to like, if you were going to lean one way or the other between those top three guys, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, and Jalen Hurts, which way are you leaning?
I would probably just play Josh Allen. And I know Lamar's been absolutely unreal, but I just think that Buffalo offense is a little more sustainable than what Lamar is doing. They said Lamar's put up back to back 39-point games for like the first time ever. And like there's only been, somebody to put up 39 games like a handful of times in the last how many years. So it's like, yes, what he's doing is amazing, but at some point, he's going to come not crashing back down to earth. Like I think he's going to have, very well could have the overall QB1 from a fantasy perspective finish this year, but I don't think he's going to, he's not going to score 39 points every single game. So I think what Josh Allen can do is a little more sustainable. More, I guess Allen's probably more likely this week to get me 30 points than Lamar is. So I probably would side with Allen. And I think, while Jalen Hurts has been absolutely unreal, I do think the Jags defense is pretty good. Now that's not to say don't play Philly because that's a mistake, but we saw Carson Wentz dice them up in week 1. So, Jalen Hurts is absolutely in play too. So, and Philly's throwing the ball a ton. So really, I guess all that to say is I'd probably rank Lamar third, and it's solely because what he's already done doesn't get me fantasy points for this week.
Yeah, the only thing I will say with Buffalo is they have a ton of injuries right now to that defense.
They do. Mm-hmm.
So it makes them a little bit more susceptible. Starting week 1, this defense looked absolutely elite.
But they still only gave up 21 to 19 to first Miami, which was a game, we all thought was going to shoot out crazy.
I think so, but some of that had to do too with just the weather. It was like ungodly hot there, and like there was a lot of these guys cramping up, and I don't know. But it's also a divisional rival game, on the road. I don't know. But Josh Allen still threw for 400 yards in that game and rushed for 47 yards and still put up 30.7. Josh Allen so far is 3 yards away from having over 300 passing yards, hitting that 300-yard bonus every single week that he's played. So he does make a lot of sense there.
Yeah, Baltimore's defense is absolutely atrocious, especially in the secondary. So
yes, very old.
Old
defense.
Yeah, they've got injuries. Fuller's out for the year. I just don't see how they slow down Buffalo really. And they're not going to, and we know Buffalo's not going to run the ball, right? Especially against like Baltimore still has a respectable run D. So all the production is going to come through the air, and we know it's going to be Josh Allen, it's going to be Stephon Diggs. Gabe Davis just shit the bed last week, but I think he just played through an injury because he kind of had to. Because I think didn't Kumaro leave with an injury early in that game or something? So, like, I think Kumaro probably would have played the majority of the snaps, and Gabe Davis would have been, just a handful of snaps guy. But I'm pretty sure Kumaro got hurt, and that forced Gabe Davis into a full-time role. Because there was video of Gabe Davis like running routes in practice, like the Friday or Thursday leading up to the game, and he was like, still hobbling around on that ankle. Like that ankle was an issue for him. So, definitely something to keep an eye on for him. And that's a big reason why McKenzie got involved as heavily as he did. So, I think Buffalo, we know they're going to throw the ball a ton. 63 attempts last week, and, we've seen them do it in the playoffs where they have 2 rush attempts with the running back. So, it's really hard not to like Buffalo this week again.
Yeah. And then I guess lastly, I just want to hit on him, Justin Herbert. What are your thoughts on him? It sounds like Keenan Allen is trending towards playing, which I think will be a big boost to this passing offense. It is a matchup against Houston. This is a game that they desperately need here now that they're 1-2, lost their last 2 games against the Chiefs, and now the shocker against the Jaguars where they just got absolutely destroyed. I know there's probably a rule of thought that maybe they don't really throw the ball as much because they're playing the Texans here, but I do think this could be kind of a get right spot for this entire offense that hasn't really kind of taken off so far. Justin Herbert has been good, I guess, in 2 of the 3 games he played outside of last week where he scored 23 DK points in 27, which is, not elite, but obviously not bad either. But I think this is a spot where I don't think anybody's going to play him, and at 7,100, Like I could see the Chargers putting up a big number against this Texans defense that is really bad.
Yeah, they are going to be missing. Was it Slater, their left tackle?
Yeah, Rashawn
He's
Slater is
yeah,
on IR. Yes,
he's out
and
for a
so is Joey
while,
Bosa.
and Bosa on the defensive end, so that's a big blow to their defense, which didn't really play great after he got hurt last week, either. So, there definitely could be points scored in that game. I mean, it's not in LA, it's in Houston, so there's no reason why Houston can't keep that game close. I mean, we've seen, Davis Mills is a very respectable QB. Like, he's not going to win you a Super Bowl or anything, but he's also not going to go out there and turn the ball over a ton and lose you a bunch of games just from sole bad QB play. So we haven't seen Brandon Cooks get heavily involved yet, but that could very easily change. Damian Pierce is involved as the running back on the other side. So it's, that's a very interesting game to stack, and I really don't hate it at all.
Yeah, because I mean, right now, I mean, the Bills have the highest implied total at 27, but the next closest, I mean, is there's really only 2 points separating them, because you have the Lions at 26 and the Eagles at 26, and then you have the Chargers at 25 in terms of high, applied point totals for the week. So, I think they're right there in play. Now, maybe if you want to just get access to this game by going with like an Austin Eckler, who the Texans have actually been really bad against, I think they're 30th in run DVOA on the year. I think you could do that, but I just don't mind, even if you want to stack up Herbert with Austin Eckler, and then whether Mike Williams or
we've seen Eckler's massive games come from the games where he's catching touchdowns from Herbert. So you very well could pair both of them together, and get all the Chargers points there. And I mean, if you look, this is kind of a good segue, I think, to running back, unless you have anybody else you want to talk about at QB.
No, yeah, that's good. So actually, let's go ahead and jump over to the running back position.
Yeah, so for Eckler, if you look at his game logs, I mean, he's had 11, 18, and 13 so far this year with 0 touchdowns for a guy that scored, 20 touchdowns last year? Pretty much led the league for the most part. Yeah, so you start adding, Eckler absolutely can have a 2 touchdown game. So if you add 2 touchdowns to each of these games that he's had already, you're looking at 23, 30, and 25 DK points, which is, a guy you're paying $7,700 for, you're likely wanting 2 touchdowns out of him. So, especially at the running back position. So, I mean, and he's only $7,700. There's absolutely no reason we shouldn't be looking to play Austin Eckler this week. And I think he's a awesome pivot off of what's probably going to be a popular Saquon Barkley at 8K and Nick Chubb at 7,900 as well. Both of those guys have been crushing and scoring touchdowns and, doing all the things fantasy managers like to see. So I like Eckler as a great pivot. And then also Jonathan Taylor up top, 8,800. He's, he was 10K at one point, or was he just 9K?
9,900.
Yeah, 9,900 just 2 weeks ago. This is his first time under 9K this year. Like I said, he's facing the absolutely atrocious Tennessee defense. And he's another guy that, scored a ton of touchdowns last year, and he's only got 1 touchdown in 3 games this year. But the game that he did score a touchdown, he scored 30 points. Other 2 games were 7 and 12. So, you start adding TDs to that. You're starting to get into the 20-point range, and it's just a all around much better game environment for them being at home against this bad Tennessee defense. So Jonathan Taylor and Austin Eckler are the 2 guys I really like up top. And then I'll let you discuss about the other guys you like. And then there's some guys in the 5K range that I have interest in this week.
Yeah, so I think this week is going to be interesting because we have a little bit of value that's being opened up by some injuries. I don't think DK did a good job of kind of pricing a few of these guys up, because DeAndre Swift is not going to play this week. He hasn't practiced at all. I highly, highly doubt he plays. So that kind of opens the door for Jamal Williams, who is 6,100 against Seattle. But I think a lot of people are going to want to play him, especially coming off that big performance he just came off of this past week, where he dropped 24.7. And then you also have David Montgomery, who doesn't look like he's going to play either. He has not practiced at all this week. So then you have Khalil Herbert, who's 5,700 against the Giants. And we just saw Tony Pollard and old ass Ezekiel Elliott combined for 170 yards against this run defense. So Khalil Herbert is definitely going to be somebody that people look at. If you look at the second half last week, once David Montgomery was out, Khalil Herbert handled almost 92% of the opportunities from this backfield. It's kind of him and Treston Ebner I know Derek, Debro, if you're in here watching, when is this Treston Ebner guy ever going to break out? I mean, Khalil Herbert looks like he's done a pretty good job, though. I do remember some offseason conversations about that. But anyways, so I think up top, I definitely agree. I mean, it's hard not to love Nick Chubb going against Atlanta. I will say this: the running back position this year has been dog shit. I mean,
Yep.
it really has on a weekly basis. Like, it hasn't paid off whatsoever, paying up
Nope.
for any of the top running backs. I guess Derrick Henry maybe a little bit last week, but I mean, he scored 24, I think, or something like that, fantasy points last week, 24 DK points. 25 DK points, somewhere right? Yeah, 25.3. And, like, he went for 85 yards and then he had 58 receiving yards, which is kind of unlike him. But this position has just been terrible this year. And it's almost been smarter just to pay down at running back and then pay up at wide receiver, because a lot of these 5K running backs have kind of come through a little bit in a big way this year. So, like, if I'm paying up 100% Austin Eckler, love him. This is a great bounce back spot. I know he hasn't done anything, kind of like what you mentioned, but all the other numbers are there for him. He is first among all running backs in targets. He is third in routes run. He is eighth in yards per route run, and he is 10th in yards created per touch. It's just he hasn't scored any touchdowns. That is going to correct. He is going to score some touchdowns. The better days are ahead for him. So this is a great bounce back spot against the Houston Texans, who I already mentioned are terrible against the run. So I love Austin Eckler at 7,700. I think that is too cheap of a price, and considering the matchup that he's going to get, against the Texans defense. And then past that, again, like I said, Nick Chubb does make a ton of sense. But I really kind of like James Robinson at 6,400 right now. And he's kind of the guy that just nobody has played, nobody talks about. He's just flown under the radar. And I was kind of even surprised when I looked and saw that he's actually third among all running backs in fantasy points per game right now. He's handling almost 62% of the opportunities. He's not being involved in the pass catcher, which does bother me a little bit, especially on DraftKings being a full PPR site. But he's still out there running routes. He's 38th in routes run. But I think that he makes some sense because Philadelphia has been elite against the pass, but they have not been very good against the run. They are bottom half of the league in rush DVOA on the year. They have, like I said, they've been great against the pass, but it's the run that has gotten them a little bit. Now, this is going to be game script dependent, because if they fall down very quickly to this Eagles team, then obviously I think it'd be a little bit more of a Travis Etienne type game. But $6,400 James Robinson, I think, is a spot that I think we could go to that I think is a little bit more interesting. But you mentioned some of these 5K running backs. Khalil Herbert and Dameon Pierce make some sense. But who are some guys you're looking at?
Yeah, you mentioned Herbert and Jamal Williams that are going to be probably two of the higher owned running backs on the slate, because this will be our first true, starters are injured ordeal. But Breece Hall last week, it was his first week overtaking Michael Carter for the most snaps on the team. So he is very interesting to me this week against a Pittsburgh defense that has been absolutely torched by running backs this year. I believe, and I know Zach Wilson's coming back. So, I think I am expecting the targets to the running back position to go down because, Joe Flacco is just a statue that, is just going to throw the ball, dump off as much as he can. So the targets will go down on the running backs. But at the same time, this is a really good matchup. And Breece Hall is one of the more explosive running backs in the league, even though he's a rookie. So, if he continues to get, trend up in terms of snaps, he's very interesting. I also like, for all the same reasons in terms of, starting to overtake snap share. Ramondre Stevenson is another guy that just passed Damian Harris last week for the first time in terms of, leading that backfield. So that's a game that they should play from behind against Green Bay. And, Brian Hoyer is another guy that could end up being a statue and just dump off a ton to a pass catching running back like Ramondre. So he's very interesting to me. And then you've got that the Seattle-Detroit game, the other side of it, where everybody wants to play Jamal Williams. I think Rashad Penny is very interesting. He's sub 5K. I know Kev, that's a guy you were heavy on down the stretch last year, and he absolutely smashed down the stretch. And why do we not want to play a running back against Detroit? And I mean, yeah, he didn't really have success was it 2 weeks ago when they got absolutely obliterated by San Francisco 27-7. But I mean, 14 carries last week, 12 carries in week 1, 60 and 66 yards in those 2 games. I mean, he absolutely could, get 20 carries and go for 100 yards and 2 touchdowns in this game against Detroit. So that's a game I have pegged to be one of the highest scoring games on the slate. And Seattle, if they get any kind of lead, Penny will he'll be fed the ball. And with, Swift being out and possibly Amon-Ra being out as well, there is a real chance that, Seattle could play this game from in front. So sub 5K Rashad Penny, I think it could end up being a steal. And we could look back on that and say, why didn't we play this 4.9K guy that's got 125 yards and 2 touchdown upside?
No, for sure. We've seen it before, and that's what it's going to take is for them to be able to even they don't necessarily need to get out to a lead if they can just keep this game close. I mean, we know what Pete Carroll loves to do and his shiny white New Balances. But one thing that really surprised me a little bit too is that he's been running some routes. Now the targets necessarily haven't been there. He ran 14 routes week 1, but last week against Atlanta he ran 21 routes, which is the most he's seen this year. Now he only saw 1 target, but I definitely think this could be a great spot for them. It's just going to be game script dependent. But you're right. If both Amon-Ra St. Brown and DeAndre Swift are out, I think this kind of neuters this offense a little bit, where it's not as nearly as explosive as what we were looking for. So I think it does make some sense to go with Rashad Penny. I mean, the Lions have been terrible against the run this year, as always. And so $4,900, yes, he's not going to be involved in the passing game, but you don't really need him to be when you're paying $4,900 for somebody. And so I do like that call, and I really do like the Breece Hall call as well. He's somebody that I have interest in at 5,400. I am concerned though with Zach Wilson. He's not going to throw the ball. Last year was the same thing.
Yep.
As soon as Zach Wilson went down, we saw, like Mike White just pepper Michael Carter last year with targets, and we've seen it this year where Breece Hall's seeing 10, 11 targets in a game. But you're just not going to see that with Zach Wilson, which is a shame. But I think you're going to start to see them utilize him more, as a runner as well, because he hasn't had more than 10 carries in any game this year. I think that is something that's going to change. So $5,400 Breece Hall, I do think it is an interesting play as well. Among the other running backs here, that we could talk about, I think those are the guys that really stand out to me at running back this week. Like I said, if I'm paying up, it's going to be probably Nick Chubb, Austin Eckler. I'll have a little bit of Saquon. But I'll probably won't have a lot of the top guys. I wish you could play Christian McCaffrey at 8,700, but they're just not throwing him the ball. He's not seeing the same type of targets that we're typically used to seeing from him. He's only seeing, last 4, 5, and 5 targets over his first 3 games, which is limited his ceiling. I mean, he's been fine. He hasn't killed you, but for the price of $8,700, I mean, he's not really worth it if he's only giving you.
He's also not been practicing this week.
Right, which we'll see what happens there. If he doesn't practice, then I think that would lean towards I think it'd be Deonta Foreman. I think is who we would see.
Both.
I mean, there's certainly going to be a committee, but I think Deonta Foreman could be the guy who gets all the early down work, goal line work, stuff
Just
like that.
Chuba in his normal role.
Yeah, I mean, Chuba Hubbard was terrible last year.
Yeah.
So we'll have to see on that as well. But again, look, I guess, is there any other running backs you really want to hit on?
No, I touched on the main guys.
Yeah. The only ones I think Cordell Patterson's kind of interesting at 6,500. He continues to see a lot of opportunities. He's not seeing any targets, which is odd.
I think it's because of Mariota.
And you're probably right because of him being able to run. But I mean, last week he saw 17 carries, 141 yards, and a touchdown at 6,500. Especially if you're wanting to game stack a little bit, I think he is an interesting option into that. And then Javonte Williams at 6,600 against the Raiders. Again, another option I don't really mind. I wish Melvin Gordon would stop getting as many opportunities that he does, but I don't think that's going away anytime soon. The guy can fumble 3 times in a game. The one part that doesn't make any sense to me, though, is the Mike Boone part.
Yeah, that I didn't understand either.
He played almost 20% of the snaps. I'm like,
yeah.
What are we doing, Nathaniel Hackett, with Javonte Williams? I don't know. It's just super frustrating. So it makes it harder to play him whenever he's $6,600 to truly trust him because it's a smash spot. I don't know if the opportunity is going to be there.
That was a Sunday night game, right? Not the. Yeah, that was Sunday night.
Sunday night, yeah.
Yeah, because I was going to say that snap share would make sense on a Thursday when your guys just took a beating on Sunday, and you want to give them a little bit of extra breathing room. But on a Sunday night in prime time against a division rival. I don't know why Mike Boone's getting snaps at all.
Yeah. All right. So just give me a couple. This like we always do. Give me your top 3 or 4 running backs this week.
I think Eckler's probably my number one. I think he's absolutely due for a monster game. Man, Herbert's chalk. He's definitely optimal. I'd say he'd probably be my number 2, though I don't know that I'm going to necessarily end up playing him. And then I'll go, if Amon-Ra's out, I'll go with Rashad Penny as my number 3.
I like that. All right, I'm gonna go. I totally agree with Austin Eckler. I'm gonna go Austin Eckler. I'm gonna go Chubb at 7,900, and then I'm gonna go a little bit off the board. I'm gonna go James Robinson at 6,400. I totally agree on the Rashad Penny call. I like that call. I think that's a sharp play. And then I think if you want to get a little bit cute, Damian Pierce once again called him out last week with somebody that I really liked. Scored 18.1. He was pretty cheap last week. I believe, yeah, he's $5K last week, so he's been priced up a little bit more at 5,600 this week. But he looks to be the guy in that backfield. It's all 20 carries last week. He's not really seeing many opportunities as a pass catcher. But if they can keep this game close and the Chargers once again struggle against the run, then I think Damian Pierce does, and it would be a nice pivot off of Khalil Herbert, who's at 5,700. So I do kind of like Damian Pierce a little bit here. And then if you really want to go dark, or go off the rage, I think Breece Hall, like you mentioned, I think also makes some sense. So, but my top guys are definitely going to be Eckler, Chubb, and then probably some combination of James Robinson or Damian Pierce type. So, anyways, let's keep it moving here and go on to wide receivers. We have Stephon Diggs, who's 8,400, Devontae Adams at 8,300, Amon-Ra St. Brown, who is truly questionable at this point, 7,700. AJ Brown, 7,400. Michael Pittman, 7,200. Mike Williams is 7K. Hollywood, 69. DK Metcalf, 6,800. CD Lamb, 6,700. Gabe Davis is 6,600. Christian Kirk is 6,600. Terry McLaurin at 6,500. Keenan Allen at 6,500. Courtland Sutton, Amari Cooper, Alan Lazard, Drake London, Deontay Johnson round up our 6K and above guys. So why don't you start us off here? Where are we going this week?
Yeah, so at the top, there's 3 guys I have heavy interest in. That's Stephon Diggs, AJ Brown, and Michael Pittman. That's 8,400, 7,400, and 7,200 respectively. All 3 of these guys are in good matchups and are, going to see probably, over 30% of the targets on their team. And they're on 3 teams that I expect to end up with 3 of the highest team totals when the slate is all said and done. So that is the 3 guys that I'm looking to up top. And I also want to say CD Lamb at 6,700. He's in the 3 games that Cooper Rush has started. If you go back to Minnesota last year and then the 2 this year, CD Lamb has 2 games over 20 DK points and 1 with 15. So 6,700 against a Washington secondary that has just gotten absolutely obliterated by every opposing wide receiver 1. I mean, Christian Kirk in week 1 absolutely decimated them. Amon-Ra in week 2 absolutely decimated them. And then just last week, we saw Devonta Smith and AJ Brown absolutely decimate them. So that Washington secondary is one of the worst in the NFL. And CeeDee Lamb is getting, over 30% of the team's targets with Cooper Rush at QB. And then it's simply because they simply have nobody else. I mean, Noah Brown is their number 2, and that's not a guy you really want to rely on as your number 2. He has played very well though in his role, but CeeDee Lamb's a guy they're going to continue to rely on, and I think 6,700 is too cheap for a guy that can go for 130 yards and 2 scores in this game. And I mean, we could have seen that line last week if he didn't drop that wide open crosser, 40 yards down the field. So he's very interesting to me, and I think nobody's going to play him because everybody's going to see that 42.5 total. But I really like. I think Dallas rolls this week, and I think Lamb is a big reason why. So I'm not expecting them to fully be able to run the football. So I think CeeDee Lamb can be the main guy that helps them push the ball down the field. You mentioned Keenan Allen coming back. 6,500 is just too cheap for him if he's fully healthy and going to play against Houston. Herbert, Eckler, and Keenan Allen really does not break the bank at all. So I think 6,500 is too cheap for him. And then getting down to below the 6K range, I mentioned Brandon Cooks 5,800 for a guy that can go 100 yards and 2 scores in any game really, because he is their main guy there. And then Jerry Jeudy 5,500 for Jerry Jeudy against Las Vegas, who has been torched by slot receivers. And you go back and look at Week 1 against the Chargers. Both DeAndre Carter and Keenan Allen were eating them up in the slot. So I think Jerry Jeudy is going to be the guy for Denver this week, and 5,500 is too cheap for a guy with his upside catching passes from Russell Wilson. So those are some of the mid to high range guys that I'm on this week. And then Debro already mentioned it, and I'll throw it back up, and you can throw it back up. I'm not sure I've got the permissions to do it, but Richie James per Debro is the best punt of the slate, and I tend to agree. I mean, there's nobody else that's that cheap that's going to have the role that Richie James has, with Sterling Shepard being out, and Kenny Galladay being atrocious, and Slayton not being good, and James is playing all the snaps on offense, and he's been a main target of Daniel Jones. So I look for that to continue in a game that they're favored. And he's probably going to be a little bit be a little popular, but I think that he could end up being their number one wide receiver on the offense. So definitely somebody that I have interest in as well.
Yeah, really quickly too. I just want to answer this question real quick. I feel like I can probably speak for you to say that you would definitely take this trade, Mike Evans, for Amari Cooper.
Yeah, I would.
Yeah. So SSJ, I just want to answer this for you real quick. Yes, I would. It's a pretty no brainer. Yes, Amari Cooper has played pretty well so far to start the year, but I would rather have Mike Evans, especially. I mean, it'd be different if Deshaun Watson was going to be back much sooner. I don't know how much you can expect, Jacoby Brissett to continue to play the way he's played, because he's played pretty well so far to start the year. But yes, I would definitely take this trade. So I just wanted to answer that for you. So for me, when it looks at, you look at these, when you brought up CeeDee Lamb, is there any concern with Michael Gallup, who has practiced in full so far? It looks like he is scheduled to be a return this week.
I actually think that he helps the offense, and especially CeeDee Lamb, because CeeDee Lamb isn't really the super deep threat, and that's the threat that Gallup brings back to the offense that they've been missing. Lamb is more of the short to mid range possession receiver that can get open. He can stretch the field, yes, but he's that's not really what he does best. Lamb is just an all around very good receiver at all facets of the game. So I think getting Gallup back just forces the safeties to have to respect the deep ball from somebody else even more, and opens up CeeDee Lamb even more. So if Gallup plays, I think that's a boost for Lamb personally.
Yeah. Okay. So some of the guys that I'm looking at up top, like one, I think a lot of people are going to want to play Devonta Smith after his two just monster performance he's put up, and he's only 5,800. But I love AJ Brown this week at 7,400. I don't think he's going to get the ownership that he deserves, and I think it's going to be because of how well Devonta Smith's played, and people are going to be chasing that. And so I really like, if you want to pay up at $7,400 for AJ Brown, I think that is a spot that I will definitely be going to. You can always play Michael Pittman because of his ridiculous target share. We've already talked about how bad that defense is. So $7,200 Michael Pittman. Though, if you're wanting to drop down a little bit, one, Cortland Sutton's way too cheap at $6,400. Kind of what I was talking about with Russell Wilson. It's kind of a cheaper stack. It's not going to take a lot to be able to get to it. But Drake London is a spot that I definitely want to talk about at 6,100. If we like this game against Cleveland, he is somebody that has been pretty good so far to start his career here. Obviously, the rookie wide receiver for the Falcons, but $6,100 this week. He's put up 12, 24, and 14 over his first 3 games of the season. And if this game, does kind of shoot out a little bit here, I think, Drake London is definitely going to be involved in this game plan, because they just don't have anybody else. Like, it's pretty easy to follow the targets here on this team, because it's pretty much Drake London and Kyle Pitts, right? I mean, there's nobody else that you're really going to be worried about them really trying to get the ball to. So especially if they fall behind early, I think Drake London at $6,100 is still probably too cheap for him. And then I wanted to talk about, though, Curtis Samuel on their side of that game, because Curtis Samuel now through 3 weeks has had almost 10 targets every single game, 11, 9, and 10 so far to start for him. And they've also been utilizing him a little bit in the rushing game, not a ton, He's seeing about 3 or 4 carries a game as well. So I think that is also, I mean, if you were talking about a player who could see 12 to 15 touches in this game against the Cowboys, they're probably going to be trailing. They're probably going to have to throw the ball quite a bit, which is something we've definitely seen so far from this offense. So $5,700 Curtis Samuel, I think, is kind of an interesting pivot off some of these other plays that people are going to be trying to get to in this mid-tier range of wide receiver this week. So I do like Curtis Samuel quite a bit. And then I think Deontay Johnson is going to go overlooked at 6K as well. Another player. I mean, that's what I'm trying to do here. Follow the targets. He's had double-digit targets each of the first 3 weeks of the season. He's clearly the favorite target for Mitchell Trubisky. You get it now. They're playing the Jets. Normally we want to target the Jets here. I know it's Mitchell Trubisky. I know Trubisky has not played very well, and this offense doesn't look very good. But he's seeing a ton of targets, and really, realistically, like if he finds the end zone in any one of these weeks, we're talking about a really strong performance. So 6K Deontay Johnson against the Jets, I do think is a spot you could go to as well, especially considering how many targets he is seeing here in this offense. So I don't think he has like some incredible ceiling, but I do think that he is definitely in play. And then down in the 5K range, DJ Moore is eventually going to go off. Like he's seeing he's the target share has been there for him, and I get it. Baker Mayfield is not good at football, but for DJ Moore, the opportunities have been there. But I think he's only seen a catchable target on it's like less than 50% of his targets. I think you're going to see some reversion there, but so I do think DJ Moore at $5,300 I think is also kind of an interesting spot. We know Arizona's secondary is trash. Like you can throw all over Arizona, and so I do kind of like DJ Moore as well at 5,300. So are there any other guys
especially if CMC is out?
Oh yeah, for sure. That changes the whole dynamic of this as well. But are there any other, I guess, guys that are 5K and below that you have any interest in? Like, if Amon-Ra St. Brown is out, like, are you looking at like a DJ Chark or a Josh Reynolds, who I definitely think could come into play here if Amon-Ra St. Brown is out? Because I mean, it's not like they have Jameson Williams yet. Josh Reynolds is $4,600, but he was a limited participant today. But I would expect him probably to have a better shot of playing. You also have DJ Chark, who's questionable as well, but he also, he did not practice today either. So, I mean, we could be talking about a lot of different guys that are out here for Detroit, but somebody like Josh Reynolds, I think, could also be kind of an interesting spot at only $4,600 as well. But is there any guys below here that you have any interest in? Outside of Richie James, like maybe a Romeo Doubs who saw 8 targets last week. The Packers have a ton of injuries right now to their wide receiver room. Alan Lazard is going to play, but Sammy Watkins is on IR. Randall Cobb is 46 years old, and we kind of saw him kind of turn into the alpha of this offense last week. Against the Bucs in a pretty tightly contested game, 8 catches, 80 plus yards, and a score. He's only 4,500. I think he may have solidified himself as the wide receiver one, connected to Aaron Rodgers. So at $4,500, I actually played quite a bit of Romeo Doubs last week because of all the injuries they had. I think he was 3,800 last week. So I still don't mind that price for somebody that could see 8 to 10 targets here in this game.
Yeah, I don't mind that at all. There's not really anybody else that stands out to me just looking through this list. The one guy that maybe could win you a tournament, but it's not a play that I feel super confident in, is Alec Pierce for Indy. That Tennessee defense, like I mentioned, is really bad against the pass, especially in wide receivers. So Pierce is a guy that can definitely stretch the field and absolutely could, have only 5 catches for 100 plus yards and a score. So he's 3,900. He's probably the guy that I would look to have a monster ceiling from the 3K range. Everybody else is just kind of disgusting, to be honest.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything like truly stands out. Like if you wanted to take a shot on like a Christian Watson, maybe catches a 50-yard touchdown or something like that at $3,700, but it's pretty thin. I wouldn't expect him to see a large amount of targets. I think Quez Watkins kind of falls into that same bucket, that deep stretch guy, that deep field stretcher, that could catch a long touchdown or something like that. That could end up paying off his price if he's able to do something like that. But there's nobody that like really truly stands out that I'm like, oh man, like this guy's in a great spot,
Yep.
down here at the bottom. So I would tend to agree on that. So um, that being said, is there any other wide receivers you want to talk about? Or you want to jump over to tight end?
I think we're good to move to tight end.
All right. So tight end this week, you have Mark Andrews, who's absolutely just torched faces, especially the last couple of weeks of the year where he has scored 28.9 and 28.7. Then you have Darren Waller at 5,600, Kyle Pitts at 5K, that's still too cheap for him. But Zach Ertz 4,700, Goddard at 45, Patty Fry at 42, Hawkinson at 41, and then you have Gerald Everett at 4K that wraps that out. Where are we going at tight end this week, and why is it David Njoku? Because I really like David Njoku at $3,700 against Atlanta.
I mean, honestly, there's nobody that really stands out to me at the tight end position outside of Mark Andrews for obvious reasons. But I mean, the one guy when I was, initially building this week, the one guy that stood out was Hawkinson if Swift is out. And that's just, it goes back to the premise of I think the Lions are going to have to throw, and he's going to end up probably being the number one or number two, especially if Amon-Ra is out too. Then that I really like Hawkinson then, and because they're facing a Seattle team that gives up a ton of points to tight ends, and it's because Seattle plays those that zone-based defense. So tight ends have always had success against them. So I really like Hawkinson at 4,100, and I'm not sure. I think David Njoku, he's definitely in play as well, and I'm not sure there's anybody else that really stands out from a somebody that I'm really excited about playing. There's just nobody getting a ton of volume this year at the tight end position. Tight end and running back have just been bad outside of the top guys. So Pitts is definitely in play at 5K against Cleveland at home in a game that could shoot out. I really like him a lot too. So those are probably the four guys that I'd be looking at this week would be Andrews, Pitts, Hawkinson, and Njoku.
Let me see if I can sell you on Logan Thomas, who's $3,300. He is 8th in routes run so far on the season. He is playing quite a bit of the snaps, 68% of the snaps here. But he's also he's 12th in market share of the air yards in this offense. He does have 3 red zone targets already to start the year, 2 deep targets. Love to see that as well. The volume necessarily hasn't been there. He has 8 catches for 87 yards and a touchdown. But Logan Thomas, I think, he's playing a lot. He's running a lot of routes. As everything that you should be looking for. The last, he saw 6, 5, and 3 targets so far to start the year. And really at $3,300, he doesn't have to do a ton. I mean, he goes 3 for 45 and a score, and you are very happy with that production at $3,300. So I do think that somebody like Logan Thomas at $3,300, I think is a very sharp play this week at that price. If you're wanting to pay down at tight end. So I do like that going that direction.
I don't hate it, especially on a team where you have Lamb.
Yeah. So I like that as a little bit of a run back. I think Daniel Bellinger, I think, is also kind of interesting. He saw 5 targets last week. And if they're going to be missing all these pass catchers here, if like Wan'Dale Robinson, Sterling Shepard's gone, there's not a whole lot of guys here to get involved in the offense. So I could see them lean on somebody like Daniel Bellinger here for the Giants. He's only $2,800 in this game as well against the Chicago defense that I'm not really worried about whatsoever. So Daniel Bellinger at $2,800 for wanting to pay down. I think you could go there. But other than that, I kind of agree with the guys you mentioned up top. And like I said, David Njoku just absolutely smashed last week, 23.9. But we've the writing's been kind of on the wall that he was going to bounce back. We also know Jacoby Brissett loves tight ends. He has been, since I think in the games he started, he's like 3rd or 4th in terms of target share to tight ends in all the games that he started. So I do like David Njoku in this matchup against Atlanta at $3,700. I think he can absolutely break that as well, just kind of like he did last week. So that's kind of where I'm going this week at tight end. If I'm not going to pay up for like a Mark Andrews or a Kyle Pitts, I think Dallas Goedert and part of a stack with Jalen Hurts makes a little bit of sense. Agreed on the TJ Hawkinson, but I'm probably going to try to pay down a little bit this week from some of the guys that I just mentioned, like Njoku, Logan Thomas, or even like a Daniel Bellinger if I really want to get really wild. I think those would kind of be where I would look to go this week. So if you don't have any other tight ends, we can jump over to defense where I guess we're just paying down this week for defense like we always do because that's what we do. And maybe Seattle could be interesting, especially if the Lions are missing a lot of these pieces.
Yeah, definitely them and Houston at home against the Chargers was the other team that I was looking at. Houston's generating pressure on the QB this year, and we already mentioned that the Chargers will be without their starting left tackle as well. So they were the other cheap defense that I was looking at, but I'll probably end up playing some Chargers guys on my team, and I definitely won't play the Houston defense with the Chargers guys. So would definitely need a different punt, and Seattle makes a ton of sense with Detroit having a ton of injuries on offense as well. Um, outside of that, I mean, I guess you could play the Jets against Mitch Trubisky.
I was just about to say that. Yeah, yeah.
I will say I may end up, and it's solely going to depend on what my build looks like. I'm not going to prioritize a defense, but if I have the salary, I'm telling you now, there's going to be a game this year where Devonta Turpin is going to house call either a punt or two punts or a punt and a kickoff. He already did it in preseason. And the Dallas D is going to be the slate winning defense because they generate pressure on the quarterback. And especially this week, Carson Wentz is a guy that takes a lot of sacks. He makes a lot of mistakes. He's already been sacked a ton of times this year, being pressured at a near high league rate. And the Dallas defense is at the top of the league in pressure rate of the QB. So not only do you get sacks and all that, but if you're forcing Washington to punt a bunch, they're punting to Turpin, and he's a guy he's already come very close to returning 2 for touchdowns already in 2 separate games this year. He's been tackled, at the 40 or 30-yard line both times of the opposing team. So it's just a matter of time before he houses one. And again, I hate paying up for defense, but if there was ever a week I was going to do it, $3,500 Cowboys at home where they can get a ton of pressure on Carson Wentz, make him make mistakes, and then every time Washington punts or kicks off, it's going to Turpin. That is a defense I don't mind paying $3,500 for.
Yeah, I mean, I'm honestly, I never even look at the top defense. I always just scroll straight down to the bottom. I pretty much build my lineup, and then whatever defense I can.
That's usually what I do too. It's just from being a Dallas fan, I know that he's had those couple returns already. The ones that were touchdowns in the preseason, and then he's had a couple in the regular season where he's just been tripped up or tackled with one guy left to beat. It's just a matter of time before he scores a touchdown. And if you can get that 6 points on top of, a 5-sack game with, a forced fumble and 2 picks, you're looking at 20 to 25 DK points from your defense. So I definitely think it's in the realm of possibility this week. And that's the only reason I even remotely considered it.
Yeah. I mean, it makes a little bit, I can on more of that. So, all right, well, let's go ahead and build this week 4 lineup. So just so we're clear, I've already locked in Austin Eckler. So we're going to start with Austin Eckler at 7,700. I think we both agreed on him. So let's go Austin Eckler, and you're up.
Let's get weird with it. Let's just fully stack the Chargers. Let's go with Herbert. Let's do something crazy this week.
All right. Do we want to go with one more Charger and go with Mike Williams or Keenan?
Yeah.
Or we could go Gerald Everett and get real weird.
I don't hate Gerald Everett personally.
Well, let's do that. Let's get wild. All right. Lock in Gerald Everett. Where are we going to next?
We need a run back, right? I think $5,800 Brandon Cooks is just too cheap. So let's go with Cooks.
All right. I already kind of talked about it, and I'm going to go with A.J. Brown at $7,400.
Okay. Let's go Rashad Penny.
I already knew you were going to say it. I already got him locked in. Let me see.
We need some salary. Well, defense will help, but we've got 4,300 per left for wide receiver.
If we're going to go with
defense.
Penny, let's just go with the Seahawks.
I like the correlation. I do like that correlation a lot, actually. Yep.
So that leaves 2 spots left, wide receiver and flex, 53.5 remaining.
Okay. DJ Moore. You've got $5,400 for flex. I think it's kind of gross. We can also do if there's nobody you like at 5,400, we could do Richie James at 4K, and they'll give you a little more salary to play with.
I was gonna go Jerry Jeudy, but he's $100 or $100 away.
Oh man.
Let's do this. Hold on.
You could just do.
I'm gonna drop down from AJ Brown
to Pittman. It's $200. That gets you your Jerry Jeudy.
Let's do this. I'll go Cortland Sutton instead, and I'll go at $6,400. That leaves $6,400 remaining at the flex, or we could put Sutton in, at flex, and we could go anywhere else there. But
6,400. Probably Drake London against Cleveland. It's got to be him or Amari. I'm not playing 3 running backs. Running backs been terrible this year.
Man, this team is interesting to say the least for sure. For sure. Yeah, I think that's what we're gonna do. Right? Yeah. So we have Justin Herbert, Austin Eckler, Rashad Penny, Brandon Cooks, Cortland Sutton, DJ Moore, Gerald Everett, Drake London, Seahawks, which I'd move. Yeah, I would move Sutton down to the flex.
That's a tournament team there. It
definitely is. If you do not feel, if you feel comfortable playing a lineup, you should probably rethink it, especially if you're hand building. So this lineup definitely makes you feel pretty uncomfortable. I feel like this lineup could score, 200, or it could also score like 75. So this is definitely a full on GPP lineup here. So, but scared money don't make money. That's the way I like to say it. So,
amen.
Anyways. Oh, just in time there, Fractal Rain. Appreciate the super chat. We'll go ahead and answer this for you. Full PPR, 2 flex, Keenan Allen, Kamara, Brace Hall, Lazard, Garrett Wilson, Jay Jones, or Romeo Doubs. I'm going to go Keenan Allen and Kamara.
I'm going to say Allen and Kamara if Allen plays. Otherwise, Kamara and Breece Hall.
Yes, I would be right there with you.
A part of me wants to say Garrett Wilson, but I need to see Zach Wilson play first to know what that offense is going to do, because he did not want to target Elijah Moore at all last year. So who knows who he's going to throw the ball to.
And I already think that. I think Romeo Doubs is also an interesting option here as well. But I think Breece.
They had a ton of injuries last week. Christian Watson was out and Sammy Watkins was out. Are both those guys out again?
Sammy Watkins is on IR. Surprise. Yeah. Christian Watson sounds like he could play, but I don't know. I think that at the very, Lazard is still playing. So, Lazard looks like he's more of the number 1, where you have, Dobbs, I think, is playing in, that number 2 role. So,
yeah.
But I think this is Keenan Allen. I expect Keenan Allen to play. He got a limited participant. Sounded like he really wanted to play last week. They held him out to be precautionary. So I definitely think I expect him to play. And then Kamara is definitely.
Yes, especially with, Herbert playing through his injury. I think that's a little motivation for these guys to get back on the field.
Yeah, so that's where we would go there. Fractal, appreciate it. Walito, I mean, hey, better late than never. I've been wondering where you've been. You weren't there
we
yesterday at
talked we
all.
talked
We
about
didn't see
Brandon
you.
Cooks.
Yeah. And then I guess that's what it was. We threw Brandon Cooks into a lineup, and all of a sudden, it's like rubbing a genie. All of a sudden,
Yeah.
Walito just comes out of
He
nowhere.
appears.
Yeah. Anytime, he's got his alert set up. So happy to have you in here, Walito. Appreciate the super chat. Wish you'd have been here for the whole thing, but you can come back and rewatch it. So, anyways, Walito, always appreciate you. With that being said, I appreciate everybody checking it out. I know we haven't said this, but we should probably promote it more. We have a Discord, especially for DFS, and we have a DFS redraft dynasty player props. I mean, pretty much anything you can ask for. It is always popping. Like, it has grown a ton over the last really month and a half, 2 months. And now, like, my phone all day is just going off.
Yeah,
from
I've had to
Discord
mute it
comments.
to where I only get now I only get notifications when I'm tagged in something. So
Yes,
because there's everybody's in there talking.
yeah. So that's exactly what we want to see. Try to build a
Yep.
strong community. So if
Absolutely.
you want to come over, jump in, and hit us up in the Discord, absolutely free. You can find it in I will put it in the description of the podcast, or you can go to our YouTube channel, the Fantasy Authority, and you can find it in any video. You will find a link to the description for the Discord, absolutely free, no strings attached. Before we get out of here, would you play Deontay and Devonta Smith over CPAT and Michael Thomas in full PPR?
The answer is yes. I would play both Deontay and Devontae. Michael Thomas might not even play this week.
Yeah, which would be wheels up for Chris Olave.
Yeah. And CPAT's not catching passes. So, yeah, give me the receivers there.
Yeah, I agree. So, anyways, appreciate you, C. Crip. That being said, once again, our lineup: Justin Herbert, Eckler, Penny, Cooks, Sutton, Moore, DJ Moore, Gerald Everett, Drake London, Seahawks D. That's taking down the Millie right there. I can feel it
I
coming.
hope so.
Yep. And we can just go out on top. So, anyways, I appreciate everybody checking it out. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button if you're watching on YouTube. If not, be sure if you're listening to this on podcast, be sure to come over and hit us up in the Discord. We want to have a lot of conversations over there as well. Appreciate everybody. Let's win that money this weekend. Week 4, we out.